I'm coming to you from the foyer of the Bethany Evangelical Missionary Church in St. Catharines, Ontario. The lead pastor of this very large and successful church is a CREST alumnus. And I had a wonderful lunch with him today and recorded an interview with him about how he transitioned this church to the next pastor, had a good succession plan. And he's a very good example of how someone can, with intentionality, make their second half their best half. So we're going to make that video available to our internet world of people as an example of how you can actually, with some attention, do this well. And that's what CREST is all about. So it's great to have some good positive examples like Larry. I'll give you the link to his video a little bit later once it's edited a bit. But I wanted to let you know what happened this week. I flew out to Ontario Monday night, and on Tuesday I began a series of meetings. These meetings were arranged by Marvin Brubaker, who is the former president of the Heritage Bible College and Seminary in Ontario here. And for the last 8 years, he has been a good friend of CREST. He's promoted us to his contacts, to people. He's recruited students for us. He's well known within this area. And so I was able to invite him to jump into my rental car, and we began to do a series of visits to different denominational offices. The first one was a group called the Canadian Baptists of Ontario and Quebec. And they have hundreds of churches in Ontario and Quebec. And they have a new president named Mark Potvin, who's just getting started. So he's trying to think through how to train his pastors. And so this meeting with us was a divine appointment for him. He was very interested to know what we do in CREST, wanted more information, and said, you know, twice he said to me in the interview, I think this might fit with some of the things I've got in mind for my pastors. So there could very well be a good connection here. In fact, he asked if I could come and speak at their conference. So that's a potential that will be happening in next year. Then we headed over to the Associated Gospel Churches of Canada, and there is a new leadership development guy there named Tom Lamshed. He's freshly into his new position as well, a good friend of Marvin's. And we were able to have a really good connection there as well. He was very interested to know what we're doing with CREST, glad to know the details, and he's very open to thinking about how we might actually come and speak for some of their training days. And from there, we went to the Fellowship Baptist. They have hundreds of churches here in Eastern Canada. And the pastor there, the former pastor, Tim Strickland, actually was a pastor in Three Hills for a while. So we had a good connection there. And also, he's a good friend of Marvin's. And he's the new leadership development guy for the Fellowship Baptist. He too is kind of looking, how does he do this training with pastors? He was really glad to know that we have been doing something like this for 15 years with pastors, and that this could be a really good benefit for his people. From there, we also then went to Vision Ministries. There's a guy there named Mike Stone. He's the new leader for this group, and a good friend of Marvin's. And he too was, because of Marvin, was very open to hearing what we have to do. And Marvin was very affirming of what we're all about. And then I met with the regional minister for the Evangelical Missionary Church. His name is John Cressman. And he was very glad to know more about CREST. He knew something, but not as much as he needed to know. And then from his conversation, I sent an email to all of the regional ministers at EMCC. And then one of the responses, one of the EMC regional ministers is a CREST alumnus as well. So he responded back affirming how good CREST has been for him, and he'd like to put on the agenda for their discussions about how they can intentionally include a CREST experience for pastors in the EMC. And then early this morning, I had a meeting with Laurie Gibbons, and he is the president of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Western Ontario. The Pentecostal groups are very strong here in Ontario, hundreds of churches. In fact, 65,000 people attend their churches. And he's the president. I was able to get into him because one of our CREST alumnus, one of our students, said, you can put my name forward to our district superintendent. And so when he heard the name of our CREST student, he said, okay, then maybe I will talk to this guy. And it opened the door. I was able to meet with him, and he was very warm. And by the end of our time, he said, you know, I'm going to talk to my leadership development guy. Maybe we should have you come and speak to our pastors about this. So I feel like the Lord has really granted a whole series of very warm and open invitations. I've followed up with them with emails, and we'll continue to pray and see how this might go forward. But my role in CREST is definitely needing to do more of this kind of thing, of being out on the road, meeting these people, making contacts, finding places and conventions to speak at, which then will result in students coming so that we can run our cohorts and help these different organizations with this really tough thing called leadership development at midlife. It is not an easy thing to do, and they know it. And that's why I'm able to say to them, this is a bit of a heavy stone. How do you do this? You can't do this kind of thing in a weekend with a conference or by handing out a book. This is a journey, it's an in-depth journey, and we are specializing in this, and this is something that maybe you want to partner with us in. So folks, it looks like the Lord just might very well be opening up doors. Oh, there's one more I forgot to tell you about. His name is Keith Knight. He is a retired businessman who has his end of his final chapter ministry is networking Christian business people all across Canada. He's got 6,500 members in his network. And Marvin Brubaker knew him, and so I was able to meet with him. And he said, yep, I'd like to put you in. I want to promote you to all my 6,500 members, because he could see how what we're doing would really help businessmen who are in their second half as well. So he has a conference coming up in June next year that he wants me to come and speak at. So there's another network. So we've put all these networks together. There's tens of thousands of people that could hear about CREST. So the Lord willing, we might be able to get the word out in fresh ways here because of this week. And I just wanted you to know, right while it's happening practically, what's going on, so that you can continue your prayer and encouragement about how the Lord may want to expand us from this point on. So glad to be able to tell you good news at CREST.